How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac. Today, I'm sitting with Neil Alexander, Nail Alexander, as he likes to go by. And Neil is an incredibly talented musician of, I guess, like every genre, really. A lot of really cool jazz stuff and a lot of really cool electronic stuff, too. And we've been internet friends bouncing off each other for a while now. And just a few weeks ago, we actually ran into each other in real life at Ableton Loop in Los Angeles. So now we've set up an actual talk, and here we are together. How's it going, Neil?
It's going fantastic, Brian.
Yeah,
how's it going with you, man?
It's going great. Things are awesome. I'm finally kind of back into my routine after, going out to Los Angeles from New York here, which you're in New York as well, right?
That's correct. I'm in the Hudson Valley, about 60 miles north of Manhattan.
Okay, and I'm probably about 30, 40 east of Manhattan. On Long
right,
Island.
out on the island, as they say. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, so it is really cool to finally talk with you. I've been watching your work for so long and enjoying what you do.
Yeah, same here, man, for sure. Been checking you out for quite a long time.
Yeah, this is a fun chance for us to get to talk about some stuff. And if anyone isn't watching, I put this on YouTube as well, but there's a great shot of your studio right now, and it's all the lights are on and the synths are blinking and everything is just kind of begging to be played. It looks great. It looks like a really fun setup you have there.
Yeah, it's basically my live rig. I mean, this is what I use on stage, more or less.
So that all comes out with you?
Not for every single gig, but for if the compensation is right and the music requires it, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Because
there's 5 instruments that we'll take out on a regular basis. Occasionally 6.
Yeah.
Sometimes 3, sometimes 2. It all depends on the situation.
Right. Now I'm looking. I can identify a push. I can see. Looks like a Moog Voyager.
Voyager in the back. Prophet 12 underneath that. And over here is a Sub 37.
Right.
Then there's a little Roland controller. I think it's an A7 or an A37, running a couple of modules in this rack here. That's kind of the only weak link. And then below that is a Nord Electro 4 for piano, electric piano, organs, and so on.
Right.
And PreSonus mixer. With the digital I/O, it's really an efficient. It sets up pretty quickly, actually. You'd be surprised. And there's no MIDI involved.
Oh, okay.
I used to be like the MIDI guy. My friends would call me for advice with MIDI, and I had, a couple of master keyboards and lots of modules. But what happens is that locks you into certain sounds, and you hit a button and certain patches come up, and they always come up, and you don't have the flexibility to change your mind in real time. So I decided to go back to a rig where each instrument is its own thing, its own voice. And I do play this song and get different sounds. So I'm not locked into playing the same sounds all the time. I can improvise, sonically as well as musically, which is really exciting.
So you kind of hop from one Moog to the next, to the Prophet, to the Nord.
Yeah, and the patches I might call up would be different. Like I'll take a solo and with one sound on the Prophet one night, and then the next night I'll take a totally different approach. And I have that freedom to call up completely different sounds because I'm not locked into this MIDI idea of pressing a button and now all these sounds come up predetermined.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Cool. So, well, there's a lot to talk to about that stuff. But maybe you can just give us a quick background, kind of your beginnings, what you're up to now, because there's a lot and a lot of different styles. So
yeah,
I'm very impressed by that. How you managed to
thank you.
Have your hands in so many different worlds.
I just temper that by saying that there are people who know me as someone who does A and people that know me as someone who does B, and they don't know that I also do A or B, you know.
Right.
People have seen me in certain contexts that don't know that I also like have seen me as a jazz pianist who don't know that I'm way deep into electronic music, and vice versa. So it gets a little, you know, it's nice to be diverse, but sometimes it's hard to kind of work them all together. I started with classical piano at age 8, way back in, I'm going to date myself here. You ready? 1968.
Very cool.
And I saw in the music store, I don't know, it was like a, do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, they used to sell record albums in department stores.
Okay.
There was a section where there were like vinyl records. This is like when I was 9, 10 years old. I was looking through the records and I saw the cover of Switched on Bach by then Walter Carlos. And I don't know if you've ever seen that. You must have seen that record cover. You can insert the picture of the record company here in the video.
Good idea.
Anyway, I saw the cover of Switched on Bach, and it just had a galvanizing effect on me. And I knew, I think I had heard some tracks on the radio with synthesizers and was very curious about those sounds. And here was a picture of one being used in classical, already playing classical music. So I just thought, oh man, this is what I have to be doing. And therein started my relationship with synthesizers at age 10.
Nice. Wow.
I didn't get my first instrument until 17, but still, it was like I was in for the long haul.
Yeah, that seed was planted.
Yeah. You know, various bands in high school, like most kids. Toured with an avant-garde theater company as a musical director and composer, and I used to mix the band from on the stage, which, you know, you're not really supposed to do, but somehow I managed to do it without too many problems. 4-piece band, drums, bass. The bass player played tablas and percussion and bass, and the horn player. You had a horn player who played sax, flute, and clarinet and other things, and myself on keyboards and running sound effects from 2 cassette machines.
Wow.
And just swapping tapes through the whole show, like next sound effect,
yeah,
run it, and while that's running, I would go to the next one. Then the band would play a piece, and then it was hard work, but it was great, and I learned a lot about, you know, being organized and running a show like that as a musical director.
Sound effects for the show.
Yeah, for the show.
Oh wow. So does that need to be like timed perfectly with the actors?
Yeah, pretty much. It's all cue based, you know, like this happens, this light comes on, press play. I had to have all the cassettes queued up. I had 1 cassette for each sound effect. So there was no, you know what I mean? I had a box of cassettes. So there was no like there's no concern about queuing up the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because you just made sure that the tape was cued to the head, you know, past the leader, and you put it in, you press go, and it just would start right away.
Wow.
So.
Don't you wish you had like a drum rack loaded up with your samples?
You know,
wow, that's so cool.
It's like real old school.
Yeah.
I started my first band in like 1980 called A Animal. And you can find the one record we made in 1990 on my Bandcamp site.
Oh, cool.
It was a, you know, typical keyboard-based power trio playing like King Crimson style progressive rock with no guitar, no vocals. And we played from 1980 to 1994, same guys. So we didn't actually get to tour that much, but we had a lot of fun. And then that sort of went the way of all good things, because all good things have to come to an end. And then I started my current band, which is Nail. in 1996. Yeah, I did like 2 years of solo shows. I have a record out called Alone at Last, which was made in this sort of in between period, in between bands. And then I started Nail, and Nail has been going in one form or another since 99. So it's kind of like coming up on the 20th anniversary.
Wow, that's great.
And we got 3-4 records out under that name. And working on more all the time. We just released a live record from the Blue Note in 2007. Yeah, that's fun. That's that's like my thing, you know. It's like that's my main outlet. I write all the music, I pick the musicians, and the personal goal for this group is to honor all of my influences. So I like Baroque music. I like 20th century classical. I like bebop. I like jazz fusion. I like ambient music. I like things like Autechre, real hardcore electronica, and a lot of other things. And so when I say honor my influences, to somehow incorporate all of those elements simultaneously in one group, sometimes even in one song. And the challenge is, of course, finding musicians who kind of share that vision, or are at least willing to try, to stretch out and see and I got a good group of guys I've been with for probably about 7 or 8 years now.
I got to imagine that's challenging to find people that are willing to experiment and try all those different genres. And
for sure.
I mean, it's hard to keep a group of people together for that kind of time too. And that's pretty nice that you've got that. And it must keep it fresh too, because I've had musical acts that is kind of like doing one thing, and then sometimes certain members branch out a little and it can get a little weird. And people expect
absolutely.
the same thing to happen. And
sometimes you have to change people to keep it fresh.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Like we're breaking in a new bass player right now, and from another group that I play with called Pictor's Metamorphosis. And that group does all cover versions of like the heavy fusion stuff from the 70s, Return to Forever and Mahavishnu Orchestra, and that's kind of the stuff I grew up on. So that's what do they say? The music you listen to from when you were like 16 to 24 or something.
Yeah,
that's what defines your life or whatever, something like that. So during that time, it was prog rock, ELP, Yes, Genesis, King Crimson, and then jazz fusion, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, Return to Forever, bands like Happy the Man. Really, really interesting prog band, American prog band from the late 70s. Really, really worth checking out if you haven't checked them out. And studying jazz piano with people like Joanne Brackeen and Andy Laverne, and learning the language of bebop, and keeping up with my Stravinsky and all this other stuff. So
it sounds
and lest I forget Brian Eno and his influence on me with discrete music and No Pussyfooting, Evening Star, the records you made with Robert Fripp. That stuff was tremendous influence on me.
So you're really pulling from all kinds of different worlds here.
It's I have a little saying: "As all music is one," right? Because it's all, there's common ground for everything. So like when you're working with scales at the keyboard, if you're going to go from the key of C to the key of G, all the notes are the same except for one.
Right.
So if you're going to go from the style of jazz to classical, say, there's a lot of similarities in harmony, in structure, in construction, and then if you're going to go from classical to, say, electronica, there are similar things. There's similar common ground that you can find between all styles of music. You know, it's when you get more to ethnic music, like Balinese gamelan or things from Africa, that you have to look a little harder for the common ground. But it's there. If you look for it, it'll be there.
Right. That's a cool way to think of it too. And I guess that helps you make those connections musically within like the same piece or the same performance.
Exactly. Looking for those, actively looking for those connections all the time. You know, seeking them out. But it sure keeps things interesting.
Yeah, I bet. And it must always keep you on your, on your toes, so to speak, as a player, to like kind of, because a lot of the like jazz, classical are very demanding technically.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I know time practicing. It's like there's no way around it. You have to move the little mechanical levers up and down,
right,
to move wood and metal with your musculature to make it happen.
I know for me, like as I dabble into electronics and computer-based music, sometimes my guitar playing takes a back seat, and it's like, well, you got to get back to the guitar and pick that thing back up.
So you're a guitar player, because I knew you played an instrument.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bass for some reason that you played.
I play the bass too. As any like rock guitarist would say. Yeah, I can play the bass.
Right, I play the bass too, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy the bass a lot and have done so in bands. But, out of respect to bass players, I'd just call myself a guitarist.
That's a good idea, because bass is really a different thing.
Yeah.
And some cats can really live in both worlds, but they are two separate worlds.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's a lot like a lot of instruments that I play is I use it. I use the instrument maybe more so than play it.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, no, that's great. I use the drums, and I play a little guitar too and mess around with things. I wouldn't consider myself a quote player unquote of those things, but everything is to be used.
Yeah.
In modern music making, I mean, we have such incredible tools now, and I'm going to show you this little box I got here. Oh, hold on. Here we go. If you can see this, this is something I got from a friend of mine in India. I'm going to plug it in now.
Okay, cool.
Assuming I can find an outlet here.
And this is one of the fun things about this particular episode is Neil has very graciously connected all of his gear. He's got it ready to go to give us some
most examples. Of it anyway.
Yeah.
Where is that?
And again, the studio look, the live performance playground you've built is very exciting.
I gotta go down here for a second. There we go. Okay. Outlets. Anyway, this the slang term for this, I think, is called a shruti box, and it is an electronic tambura from India. So if you know the tambura, if you know Indian music, tambura is like a 4-stringed, or sometimes 3 or 4 or 5-string drone instrument from traditional Indian music. So you have the sitar player, and I think it's South India as opposed to Northern India, which is a different system. So the Southern Indian musicians, they would be a tabla and a sitar, and then someone in the background essentially doing this.
It's a very cool sound.
Can you hear that okay?
Yeah.
So it's a really nice, it's in a portable little box. It's great for practicing, especially solo instruments or singing too. And for a long time, I had it on stage on a volume pedal. And I would just, we'd go to sections where the chord wouldn't change, and I would set it to the right note and then just bring it in and let it run while we improvise over it.
Ah, cool.
And, you can have fun with stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a great sound. And I don't know, maybe it's the fact that it's coming out of the speakers, and then I guess it's being picked up by your microphone.
Probably by this little microphone here. Yeah.
I
could run a cable. I think I have a cable around here somewhere. But Yeah, maybe I'll make a little sample of it later. You can fly it in.
It's got a sort of like electric guitar feedback sound coming through here from what I hear, which is, something I always love.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's the Tambora has a very specific sound. They make nice apps now for the phone and for your phone and your tablet that will do the same thing. They're basically rendering my box obsolete.
Well, it doesn't look as cool as that box, though.
Yeah, no, it looks really cool. And I asked, I have friends that go to India on a regular basis, and I asked you to bring it back for me. See the pictures on the top.
Cool.
Different settings, right? And there's different rhythmic patterns that it will do, and different keys, and you can have it be 4 strings or 5. It's like an extra string you can turn on and tune to a different note. It's kind of fun. It's really fun.
Well, there's that physical knob thing, I can see you're into that.
Yeah, I'm way big into that for sure. Yeah. I found the push to be really a wonderful hands-on tool for working with Ableton.
Yeah, it's kind of my primary way of interfacing these days. It's just right there. It's, it's hands-on.
Yeah, everything. You can get around the software really, really fast. I did a show. I sent you a link for that in Colorado last year at the Rocky Mountain Synthesizer Meetup.
Right.
And that was one of the first times I got on stage and did a 30-minute set with none of these, no keyboard instruments, not even a little one, like a 2-octave jam, like nothing, using only the push. And I think I had something going in the iPad. And I was, I set it up so that I could take a piano solo, I could take a guitar solo, I could do some string work, all the time triggering and running loops and things like that, and jumping in and out of, going from session mode to keyboard mode and making mix moves and instrument edits on the fly, just seamless, like outstanding.
Yeah, it worked nicely for you. Was it a little hectic switching between the pages or anything like that?
You just have to get used to it. I just had to get used to it. I had to push 1 for a while, and it was a little clunkier, though it had some, it wasn't as pleasing to look at.
Yeah.
All right. But it set the stage for being able to get around, they behave in slightly different ways. And there's some things about the push 1 that I actually liked, and the way you could scroll through different instruments. You could call up different instruments in the keyboard section without changing the mixer focus. So I could be playing a keyboard on track 20, but still mixing tracks 3 through 10 or whatever.
Right.
And push 2 behaves a little differently in that respect. But once you get used to it, it's pretty cool, man. Yeah. I'm enjoying it very much. Yeah, you take it with me everywhere, just about, because it's really, you can do some really unique things with it. But Ableton is, I went through a lot of samplers after my cassette.
I could imagine you would be interested in samplers
early
after that.
Cassette thing. Yeah. I had a Akai S5000, like a gigantic white face,
with just a few
with
seconds,
a whopping 4 gigabytes of.
Did it have 4 gigs? Wow.
Well, I put a 4 gig hard drive.
Okay.
I think it came with 128 meg or something like that. To put chips in it, and at the time I was touring with a Pink Floyd tribute band called The Machine.
Oh, welcome to the Machine.
Nice. I toured with them from 96 to 2006, and I ran all the samples. Actually, they originally had all the samples set up on CD, which the front of house guy would run. But then that started to change. We started to add more things, and then I had these, like I said, I had these giant MIDI, 88 key MIDI controllers, and I would press a button on a foot switch. It would change all the sounds on all the keyboards all at once. and it would set up like 3 or 4 keys at the bottom of the lower keyboard that were all sample triggers.
Right.
So song by, like I had different patch song by song, and it took a long time to build that rig, but you know, to program it and get it going. But then it just worked perfectly every night.
Yeah. Wow.
Did a
Oh,
lot
that
of
sounds
shows.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that now? Were you relying on a separate, like a new person every night to trigger the samples, or did you have a separate front of house guy?
We had
person?
a front of house guy that would tour with us.
Yeah. Okay. You must
every
have
so
to
often,
in that case.
yeah. Every so often he couldn't make it, or we'd have somebody else, but it was pretty clear instructions, you know. At this point in the set list, you know, press, you know, play track 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we always had to make a set list because sound and lights, you can't just be calling in a show like that. You can't just be calling tunes on the fly. You have to, the light person has to know like what's coming next. You know, the sound person has to know what's coming next. So it made it very predictable, but you know, very a experience for the audience. You dig?
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And I mean, those performances must have been intense. How many people were in the band?
Just 4.
Yeah.
Just quartet. Occasionally we'd have a guest vocalist or a guest saxophone player, but generally just the 4 of us. We all sang. And the guitar player had a Strat with piezo pickups in the string saddles on the bridge with a separate output, so he could get a really convincing acoustic guitar sound from his electric guitar. And then the bass player also played guitar and acoustic guitar. And I had a lot of keyboard. It was you know, it was, I did it for 10 years. So we did like 100 shows a year for 10 years.
Wow.
So,
yeah, you're doing a lot of shows now still. You're all over the place. I'm coming from you're going to California soon, and so what are some of those gigs? What do you got coming up?
Well, let's see. A lot of different projects. Nail is one that I like to focus on, but we don't have anything on the books right now. The next thing I have coming up, sometimes I have to look at my calendar to see this. I can't keep it straight. But the next thing I have come up is with a group called Cloudburst, which is with some jazz funk musicians from Woodstock, New York. And we play just an assortment of tunes that we enjoy. Some stuff from the jazz standard repertoire, some funk tunes, some Herbie, some Ahmad Jamal, some a bunch of different things, like stuff by the Meters or by Maceo Parker, and kind of trio, keyboards, bass, and drums. We just stretch out. It's like a jam band kind of vibe. We have a good time. I have a series at a local venue here called Neil Alexander Presents the Music of, and then it's whatever I'm doing that month. It's once a month. This month coming up will be December 9th, and we'll be doing the music of Jeff Beck with no guitars.
Okay. So is that like going to be a lot of like synthesizer?
Yeah, a lot of like distortion, synthesizers with distortion and Ableton loops. You know, like we're doing some kind of more obscure of Jeff's stuff. There's a record called Who Else, and a couple of his later records that have like kind of like drum and bassy electronica stuff. And so we're going to be digging into that part of his catalog as opposed to the stuff that everybody would normally expect to hear at a Jeff Beck show, things like Freeway Jam, or, you know, Jeff had a whole slew of famous stuff from the 70s. We're not doing any of that. We're doing all like 90s, 2000s.
Deep cuts.
Nice. Yeah, deep cuts, exactly. So, but that'll be super fun. And then I also have a series at a local venue where I play jazz on the 4th Saturday of every month. And I bring in different people. I also work a lot with dance. That's another thing I should mention. I've been working with dance since 1982. I started as a dance accompanist at New York University, and have continued as an accompanist and a composer with modern dance for quite a long time, and use Ableton. My setup in a dance class is the push on top of a grand piano. And I developed a whole rig with certain foot pedals, triggering loops. I have a really kind of fleshed out system that I've been using for that, where I can run. I'm going to talk about this because I think it's cool, and I think maybe your listeners would enjoy it.
Yeah, please do.
I have live sets that have lots of MIDI instruments, and a few audio tracks for drum loops and things like that. But it's all driven by tracks with multiple looper instances. And so how that works is I'll have 4 tracks, one say with a drum or percussion sound, and one with some kind of pitched sound, either a synth or a keyboard or something in the middle of the range, set of ostinatos, and then 2 more tracks with loopers with more ambient sounds. Now the trick is the first 2 loopers are tied into Ableton's clock. So I can record a loop, press, let it play, and it starts the clock. The other 2 loopers are not connected to the clock at all. So I can create these sort of ambient washes of sound that will loop in the background, whether or not any clips are running, whether or not the clock is running. If I change tempo, they still run. And so it allows me to work with multiple, kind of ideas at the same time.
Are you doing a similar thing with I'm drawing a blank on the name, the Indian device you just showed me?
This guy.
So is it like a volume pedal thing where you're fading these different washes in and out?
Well, I'm usually using the push just to mix the tracks up and down, right?
Yeah.
But it's really easy to create just like an ambient track and just loop it, and then let it play while I work with stuff that's in tempo.
Right.
Turning things on and off, building tracks, taking instruments in and out. But that just kind of sets a mood, if you will. And then you can also play with that. You can change its tuning, you can reverse it, you can half speed it. There's lots of fun you can have with the looper instruments, as you know.
Yeah. They are quite a lot of fun. A lot of action going on with the looper right now with the this new pedal coming out that it's on the.
Did you meet the gentleman, the French guy?
Yes, Pierre.
I think his name is Pierre.
Yeah. I got to talk to him just for a few minutes. He was at the Ivar Theater, one of the sections, and he was presenting. I wound up presenting right after him, to my surprise. And
you didn't know you were going to be presenting?
No, I didn't. They kind of asked me if I would. They had some open slot, I guess. Do you want to present? Sure. When would that be? In 20 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll throw something together.
And so what did you do?
Oh, I spoke about like creating your own sounds, sampling things around you that you might not really think are going to be musical, throwing them into the sampler and seeing what happens.
Wow.
Just to be kind of adventurous and also not to be uptight about what kind of recording gear you have at the time. Like your phone is a great tool to have. And even though it's not, your proper professional field recording setup, you can still get a decent recording. And a lot of times I find that the character of my phone, even if it is like kind of like a weaker recording, sometimes that makes it special. It has a certain charm to it.
Yeah, it definitely has its own. It has its own character for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I guess in the absence of proper professional gear, go for character. Accept the flaws as character.
That's a great philosophy, man. That's really that's very cool.
It's allowed me to get a lot of cool sounds because I've just decided to do it for the heck of it. And
Sure.
It's also a little reminder to do it more, honestly. But yeah.
And you have, with a piece of software like Ableton and a USB mic, I mean, you don't really need, and your imagination. That's really all you need to make interesting music.
That's it. Yeah. A little creative thinking, and you can go anywhere. And I'm always surprised by people doing things, simple things even, that I just never thought of. Oh man, like that's a great idea. How come I didn't think of that? So
I did a session. I work with choreographers sometimes, and I was working with this woman, Lane Gifford, a couple of years ago, and she had a kind of a big sprawling piece that went up in the New York Fringe Festival in like 2014 or something like that. It was a few years ago. But there was one of the scenes took place in the kitchen. So I set up a big table in this room with a couple, pair of stereo mics, and I just brought an armful of pots and pans down and just banged on them with all kinds of different things, and took individual and these drum racks of kitchen sounds.
Nice.
It was great fun. It's great when you have an opportunity to do something like that. Somebody asks you to do that.
Yeah.
As opposed to like,
go play.
Today I think I'm going to record kitchen implements. Why? I don't know. No reason.
Yeah.
It's nice when somebody says, "Hey, could you put something together for this?" And like, yeah.
Well, it's a good
fire
assignment.
Up the old engines.
You
Yeah,
must need that as an assignment. I think it's good to give yourself assignments like that.
Absolutely.
It's funny, when I first got a computer, a laptop, and Pro Tools at the time, one of the first things I did was go in the kitchen with a mic and just record all these weird sounds. Because a big motivation for me to get into computer-based recording was listening to bands like the Beatles and Pink Floyd, and just bands that were experimenting and doing weird things.
Sure.
Trying things you're not supposed to do, and just... So I was really excited about that. I didn't know about samplers, really. I don't even know if Pro Tools had one at that time. But I was just dropping the individual hits on the timeline and just building tracks that way, one by one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think back, it was like a little more tedious than I think I'd tolerate right now. But I loved doing it. It was a lot of fun, and just not really knowing what I was going to get.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I did some remixing in Digital Performer.
I had a stint in Digital Performer after Pro Tools.
Yeah, I was a big DP user for a long time until I discovered Ableton, and then it was like, well, I guess that's the end of that. But I had to remix this orchestral music. This choreographer and this composer were working together. The choreographer did not like the composer's music. So I was kind of brought in under the radar to do a remix of this like contemporary classical music with Latin percussion instruments. And I didn't have kind of the remix tools that a lot of people use. So I just would turn samples around and just manually chop them up and move things around until things got into the right rhythm that I wanted. That's that same idea, but it was a lot of work, but it ended up being really,
right.
It ended up being very cool.
I mean, I guess I think back now and wonder how I put up with it, but at that time, that was an advance for me, having a grid to even drop things on.
Sure.
For a while, I was using ADAT machines with the VCR tapes, and then I really stepped up and had a digital ADAT. It was called like the HD24 by Alesis, and you would put in your like 20 gig hard drive and it had a clock on it, and it had copy and paste functions. But the way I would have to do copy and paste is I'd add a calculator, a scientific calculator, and a big notebook, and I was always calculating, all right, if this song is at this many BPM, how much time is it, for like 4 bars of music, and I'm going to move this part here. And I would do that. And it's so funny. I always keep my notebooks. It's something like I never throw
Yeah,
away.
sure.
Probably should, especially with this notebook.
No, you gotta hold on to all that stuff, man, for sure.
It's like a 5-subject notebook with just filled up pages, top to bottom, just numbers.
Wow.
And it's just me mathematically editing tracks and trying to put sounds at the exact right spot. It was, and again, at that time, that was like, wow, I could do this. I can like actually, change things. Because for so long, if you were trying to punch something in and you messed up, then you ruined your recording. You couldn't undo that.
Yeah, that was that was the danger.
Yeah.
That was the element of danger in the early recording studio. It's like, I want to fix that solo. It's like, all right.
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
Yeah.
And then splicing things. Like, I remember the first time I was in the studio and they needed, okay, we're on the out chorus of, the fade out, and we're going to fade this part out. So how long do we need to play it? I'll just play it a couple times. We'll copy the tape and splice it in like 6 times or something, and then do the fade. Way early, had no idea that people were even working like that. But did you ever try to transfer any of your old stuff? Stuff from those ADATs?
Not really. One of my friends who we both invested in the ADATs together when we were like 19 or so. This is the first thing we ever bought on eBay.
Wow.
Maybe 1920 probably, but he went through that a little bit, and he did send me a couple things. But to be honest, a lot of the stuff that was worth keeping, I actually finished and made into like tracks, which is surprising to me right now because I have so much unfinished stuff.
Are those tracks, can you hear those tracks online? Can you find them?
Yeah, I've got them online. I used to go by the name Project Nerb, which was Brian backwards. So I still, you know what? Like, I still really do like those recordings. They were very adventurous. That was my spirit. And I had this like kind of epiphany, like, we were getting into recording, we're getting mics, we were like EQs, reverbs, and actually getting a little serious. And I would obsess about all the little things, where the mic goes. Let's do that again. I got to place the mic, every little detail, just all by myself too. And I just one day kind of said, you know what? I got this really good gear. It's going to sound pretty good, even if I do a bad job recording it. So I kind of just said, the hell with it, and just recorded without worrying about that stuff as much. And I got a lot done that way. I wasn't sweating the little details as much. And
sure.
And it's something I try to remind myself of every once in a while now. Like when I find myself like EQing a kick drum for 45 minutes, I'm like, all right. At this rate, I'm never finishing anything.
Yeah, it's really tricky, especially, you have so many choices. I mean, finding the right kick drum sound to start with.
Yeah. I didn't have to find a kick drum. I had one kick drum. There's a real kick drum. I had to play it as well as I could.
Yeah. Limitations sometimes can be very important, to creating art,
It's actually probably the most important thing, I think, these days, because we can do everything. We have every tool at our disposal. Even if you only have the basic whatever comes with Live, without going into sample packs and without going into plugins, you've got so much stuff for really any kind of music, especially if you have a microphone too.
Yeah, but a good microphone is a good investment.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I just got this mic not too long ago, and I love it. It's a Heil PR40 broadcast mic. It's got the nice bass when I get close.
I just bought a pair of condensers. I needed a new pair of condensers for various reasons, so I got these. What the hell are they? Can't even remember what they're called. My memory is so shot. Aventone.
Okay.
So little shotgun mics. I got a pair of them.
Pretty.
Different capsules.
Nice red color.
Nice red color, very important.
It makes it sound a little better.
Wood box makes it sound better, you know.
Yes.
I used to always joke about the Voyage, you know, the Moog instruments and the Prophet too. They have real wood on the sides, and I said, yeah, it makes it sound better.
Oh, I put wood side panels on my Korg MS-20.
Oh, nice.
And
you got it there. Is it there handy?
It is handy. Let's see. It's under my little dust cover here. It's like
oh wow, you have a dust cover, high tech.
Yeah, it's a sheet.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I have a moving blanket. Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
beautiful.
I bought them off someone online.
Those are great machines, though, man.
Oh, I love
nothing MS-20. Sounds quite like them.
Yeah, it's so hands-on too, and and the fact that it doesn't have presets really, just love that about it actually, because it really just makes you explore.
Yeah, you have to make every sound. It's like, well, what kind of sound do I want? Melody, sound effect, bass, you know, and then you have to like create it and sculpt it.
Yeah.
Until it fits your vision.
Right.
You know, and that's really
it makes me stick with a sound a little bit too. Where okay, I made the sound, so all right, I'm gonna use it now.
Right, exactly.
I'm not just gonna save it and then try to make another sound.
Right.
I get into that all the time. I was like, I'll make another one. That was fun.
If you come up with a sound you really like, you know. But when you come up with a sound you like, it can be so thrilling, you know. You just start using it all over the place.
Yeah, it inspires you.
Yeah, it inspires you, exactly. And you think of other things to do with it. Like I had one of my first synths was a Moog Micro Moog. Which is like, it's got a black plastic face with these black knobs with white markings on them, white lettering, had a pitch ribbon instead of a pitch wheel, one oscillator. I mean, it was like just the bare bones, all I could afford, you know, when I was 17. But I would just overtrack. I had like a real deal that could, you know, bounce forth. And I would make these recordings with like 5, 6, 7 tracks, playing everything in, like imagining the finished product and going, okay, first I'll do this, and then I'll add this kind of sound, and then and I did like experiments where I would let the thing self-trigger at playing a different note at a different tempo, and just overlay these, you know, multiple tracks of that. Like first it would be playing a low note, very slow, and then note in the middle of the keyboard, sort of a little faster, and then a higher note also really slow, and another note much faster, you know, and then just like, and not, the tracks weren't connected to each other at all, except that you would hear them at the same time after the overdubbing process, you know, but just that joy of experimenting.
Yeah.
It's just really,
I think
it's wonderful.
I think with the availability of so much stuff now through your computer, or just there's so many easy to buy synths now that are cheap and readily available. I don't think, at least me anyway, I'm not getting to know my gear as much as I used to when it was all you had, and you really dove in and you really stretched its capabilities. And it's something I'm trying to do a little more. Trying to really like get to know things.
Sure.
It's also because I need to stop spending money on gear. And
well, I mean, hey, gear acquisition syndrome. You know, it's a problem we all have to deal with.
Well, it's a nice like way to sort of fool yourself into justifying, you know, a little
like
cutback.
You know, like Waves has these, you know, Waves plugins. They have they're having these big specials because of, you know, Cyber Monday or whatever.
Right.
It's like, all right, I'll buy another plugin. You know, it's like this one might be cool, but you know. But as a performer, as someone that has focused most of my energies into performing, when I'm going to buy a piece of gear or look at a synthesizer or something I'm going to use on stage, there's something that I call its playability.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, what's its playability level? Like, if I turn a knob, how far off what I expect to happen is what happens.
Okay.
So in other words, if I'm making an adjustment on the attack parameter of an envelope generator, for example,
right.
and I turn it to, say, 1 o'clock, and I'm expecting that it's going to take X long now for the sound to come up. If I have to spend time finding what I want, finding that value that I want because it's not intuitive as to where the knob goes, then I would say that has a less amount of playability.
Yeah.
And I select instruments for sound and for playability. The Nords are particularly good. As all the controls are on the front panel. You can you have EQ, you have effects. You don't have to go into any menus.
Right.
The thing sounds good, and you can play it. That's the thing about, like we were talking about the MS-20 and early synthesizers. You had to play them. You had to manipulate them in real time. You couldn't just sort of like select a preset and go like, oh yeah, that sounds okay, I guess. Yeah. You had to like work it, and that's for me part of the thrill of performing is operating this equipment.
Yeah.
And changing filter settings, changing envelopes, and monkeying with the LFOs, all while I'm actually playing and improvising as part of the experience. It's really fun.
A feature I really appreciate on, I guess I have it on the Prophet 6 has it, and so does I've got a Sub-Fatty.
You have a Prophet 6?
Yeah.
Ah.
That's like that was like one of the last things.
Yeah. They have a very high playability factor.
Oh yeah, and they've got the a little button, the preset button, which turns off the preset and just gives you wherever the knobs are.
Yeah.
And I just like that so much because on so many synths that have all these presets, the knobs could be pointing anywhere and it has nothing to do with where they really are.
Right.
So you can't really, for instance, I've got the Bass Station 2 that came out a few years ago.
Sure.
Which it was great. It sounds really nice. I have a lot of fun with it. But, when you queue up a preset, it's just wherever the knobs are random. So you turn a knob and like you turn it a little bit and then like all of a sudden it's all crazy and different than what you thought it'd be.
The sound jumps.
Yeah.
Right. The value of the knob jumps to where the new position.
Yeah. And it's just nice to, you can't really dissect patches on it for that reason. You can't look at it and say, oh, so this is what I've got. Whereas, when you have those, like the MS-20, like it is exactly what it says it is.
Yes, it is exactly what it is,
So I really do like that. And more and more, like I'm more drawn towards those pieces of gear and I have more fun playing them than the stuff that I've like kind of look at and it's like, well, this could be anything right now.
And what else did you say you had? You had a Sovtek?
No. What did maybe I said the Sub-Fatty probably.
Oh, the Sub-Fatty.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the little one, right? The little
it's a small little
face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got presets on it, but I almost never use them. It's kind of like a weird matrixy preset thing where there's a bank button and then there's 4 buttons and then another bank button, the same 4 buttons. I
came across one of those in rehearsal recently and I couldn't figure out how to get into certain. I wanted to change the pitch wheel amount and I couldn't find it. And
that's a manual thing. You gotta. I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go in the manual too.
Yeah, but that cuts into its inherent playability.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It is nice. It does have that button where you can turn off the presets and it's just the knobs.
Sure.
But to do some of that stuff, there's like key combinations you have to hold and. You'll never remember them unless you're looking at the manual.
No thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll pass.
Yeah.
Sub-37 I find is incredible. I had a little fatty for a while, and it had a really great sound. But you had one knob per section of the synth.
Yes.
One knob for all the EG parameters. One knob for all the LFO parameters.
The first analog synth I ever bought was the Slim Fatty, which I think was just the little fatty without the keys.
It's the rack unit.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could get 8 of those, and you could make basically the equivalent of an Oberheim 8 voice, which if you wanted to buy one of those today would cost you $20,000. Where every time you play a note, it triggers the next voice in the chain, and can have a completely different sound.
Right.
Are you familiar with the SEM, the old SEM 8, 4, and 8 voices?
Not because I've ever touched it, just because I've watched YouTube videos. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing really sounds like that idea, of like 8 different synthesizers controlled by one keyboard.
Right.
It's pretty, but you can do that with the Slim Fatty.
Yeah, that's cool.
You can set those things up like that. I was tempted to grab a handful of them at one point.
Yeah, that's how I got the Sub Fatty though. I had an opportunity to buy it used, and it was about the amount where I could sell my Slim Fatty for, and it was just like you said, you had to press a button, and then the knob would do that particular parameter. Press the button, now the knob does that.
Right.
And I have to say, to have 4 big knobs, they really implemented it well.
Yes, they did,
because it wasn't that bad, but it's still not having a knob per function. That's a luxury.
It's not quite the same. I mean, like I said, the Sub 37 over here is just a joy.
Yeah.
To it's like, the oscillators need to be detuned a little more. There it is, or the LFO fast, or what it's like everything is right there.
Yeah.
The MS has that wonderful patchability, right? There's some patch points on the front.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like a miniature version of the old ARP 2600, which was a portable modular synthesizer that you could patch. Did you ever try? You must have tried the. I'm curious your thoughts on the app version of the MS-20.
The app version is cool.
Thing is, you have a real one. You could have A/B'd them.
Oh yeah, well, nah. I mean, you know what? This is a playability factor too. Like even if they sound identical,
yeah, that's true.
It's just
not
grabbing a knob is not the same as swiping a finger on the iPad. And also on the iPad, you do have to do like a little bit of scrolling.
All right, yeah, you have to go screen to screen. Yeah,
a little bit of that.
It's little challenging.
But I really did like it. I recorded a track with it once and made some Ableton Live packs for downloads, and I think like those chord gaps are actually really nice. They sound great. But I haven't had a lot of use for that MS-20 app since I got the actual hardware.
Yeah.
But it was kind of how I knew I liked it also.
Sure. Yeah, it's like, no, I'll stick with the real one.
Yeah.
With the real thing. For sure. So let's see. What else is going on? Anything that you have your ear on that's records coming out, new music that you're interested in? I'm always curious to hear what people are listening to these days.
It's all directly connected to Loop, actually. I'm going to Ableton Loop. I don't know if you caught the final performance from Katie Aurelia Smith. I think is how she says it.
No, we left Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I had a big rehearsal Monday afternoon, and I had to get back in time to get a good night's sleep and get up and rehearse Monday. So I couldn't stay there for Sunday.
Yeah, she performed at the end. She had some dancers too, which really added a lot to the show.
Wow.
But she has a modular rig, and she's, I guess, like got Ableton Live doing some backing tracks and stuff. But the performance was it was like transportive,
Wow.
I'll be honest with you, I'd never heard her music before, and I went in there, and I was a few minutes late because I was facilitating the podcasting sound design meetup. So it was my job to just kind of get people talking.
Yeah. I did the same thing with the controllerist meetup.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they contacted me about 2 weeks out and said, "Hey, would you host this?"
Yeah, same with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. It was a great time. It was like a packed room of people talking, and
nice.
we actually made a Facebook group of everyone that was in the meeting so that we could all stay in touch.
I would have liked to have gotten into that one, but I signed up way too late for everything. My meetup was totally different. There were 2 other people there.
Oh, wow.
But it was cool because we just
Sure.
got to talk
Yeah.
and just share ideas. So I got back to the main theater a few minutes into her performance, and I kind of stuck my head in there, not sure if I was going to stay because there's so much going on. There's so many people to talk to. I mean, we had a chance to talk. It was nice to hang out on the rooftop and just make connections with people and just find out what they're doing. For me, that was probably the thing I took away the most, was just those in-between times. Really enjoyed that. But, 30 seconds into standing in that room, I was like, whoa. I was just in another universe. So I've been listening to her record a lot. So
I'll go check it out. I'll find
The Kid. It was a performance of the record The Kid. It was really really cool music. And
I think we went to a show on Friday night with a woman I'd never heard of before, who apparently a lot of my friends know who she is. Juana Molina. From Argentina. And she was incredible. I mean, she did a performance. She played guitar, 1 keyboard, and sang, and had a ton of pedals, different looping pedals and effect pedals, things that would change her voice to like distortion sounding or dreamy, and then just playing this like kind of gritty stuff on the guitar, these kind of like off-kilter loops, and then she had a gentleman working with her. You had someone working with her. I'm not sure. Anyway, you had someone working with her who was doing like drum stuff on it would look like a machine, like actually playing parts, just like playing drums on the machine with some loops. But it was like tremendously engaging and exciting. And I come to find out, like, after the weekend, that, oh yeah, you didn't know about her?
Yeah.
Oh man.
That does happen a little.
So yeah. You weren't in Berlin last year, right?
Nope.
Or were you?
No.
Yeah. That was my introduction to like, I had just started the Hudson Valley user group.
Right.
And I wanted to really like immerse myself. It's like, okay, I'm using Ableton all the time. I love it. I can talk till I'm blue in the face about how great it is and the things you can do with it. I should go to this conference. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know anybody there, and I was just this packed full of amazing people and things and stuff to learn and connections to make. And it was like just a 3-day, it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I was very happy to go back to Los Angeles.
Yeah, I expect to be wherever it is next year.
Yeah, you can't. You gotta do it. I think it's gonna be back in Berlin next year. That's the rumor.
Yeah, I was there, kind of saying like, "Oh man, I've missed out. I gotta be at this thing." Just the energy, like you said, to have so many different people that are doing so many interesting things, all open to share and ready to talk and kind of nerd out on it.
Yeah.
It's just an energy. Like, it's so important. And I guess, in the opening address, Dennis DeSantis kind of said, like, we're all scattered around the world and we connect on the internet, but this summit is the room we can all get together and hang out in.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And that was really, really set the stage. And I was really inspired by how friendly and open everyone was. You'd be standing on a line and it didn't matter who you were next to. You had a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Walking in the street, someone with a little bracelet on. Hey, what's up?
Yeah, absolutely.
When does that happen? It's such a rare thing. It's such a great like camaraderie.
Yeah, and all every reason music, we have these creative ideas. We work with music and visuals, or we're trying to do something new and different. We're trying to find our voices, and we're all there for, even though it's a wildly diverse people doing wildly diverse things, but we're all there for the same fundamental reasons.
Kind of all on the same mission.
Yeah. It's really, really thrilling. I mean, I found it to be just thrilling.
Yeah. I agree, and I felt so inspired to make music. I do kind of wish I would have had an opportunity to participate in some of the jams. Or start a jam like on the rooftop or something. Maybe next year.
Well, I'll tell you what. Next year we'll host something together. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be nice to just.
I did some of the jam stuff in Berlin, but it was very crowded and it was hard to get in there.
Yeah.
And I perform constantly, so I didn't feel like I needed to do that there.
Yeah.
And I also, I know that there were other people that don't have those kind of opportunities, so I wanted to. I don't need to do that. Let somebody else do that.
That's considerate.
But I think if we can host something where we can participate as hosts and facilitate other people doing it, I think that would be a great idea.
I could have been like a hotel jam even.
Sure.
There's so many.
Yeah, like a post after hours kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was so wiped by the end of the night, just doing so much.
Saturday night or Sunday night or both?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you name it. the whole weekend.
All right, you got there on Friday. That's right.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember when I ran into you, if it was Saturday morning or Friday afternoon. I guess it was Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I think it was right before the main address.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Awesome.
So let me ask you, just kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Sure.
Because you're big on improvisation, right? I mean,
yes.
Doing jazz, right? Of course.
Yes.
So how do you, because sometimes with the electronic music, it can be very easy to just set up a timeline and you're following left to right kind of linear things. And also just to sound selection, I guess, too, is a little predetermined, right? I mean, you can't really be sound designing or selecting presets too much on the fly. So how do you balance that, like where you can still improvise but still keep like structure and not go too far off the deep end?
Well, I mean, one of the ways that I have addressed that very issue is by having instruments live, like synthesizers and keyboards and stuff. And it's irrespective of any kind of timeline or, I do tons of gigs without the computer at all.
Yeah.
And, but in that context, where I'm working with Ableton or, I have actually created, because when I'm in a dance class, I'm mostly improvising. So I've created these little patches and kind of little systems whereby I can feed some data into the system and get back music that is unpredictable in certain ways. One of the ways I do that is with arpeggiators. Set usually to play random or in different ways, and funneling through scale plugins or through other things to sort of restrict the restrictive variety of notes. And then with a arpeggiator plugin, I can just feed it some notes, and then it will play back something that is in time with the master clock of the program, but it's not, that I can then work around. Also understanding key centers and how to work in a modal sense musically. For example, in the key of let's say E major, right? You have a lot of variety. You have C sharp minor, you have F sharp minor, you have A, you have B major or minor depending on the seventh, and you have a lot of ways you can move around within one key. So you can set up an ostinato with an arpeggiator or with a loop or something, and then you can float around that key center. If you set it up with only 2 or 3 notes, it gives you even more options. So it's, I think that a certain amount of understanding of music theory is helpful in that respect. I fall into the same traps that lots of other people do, especially when working with loops. How do you keep it interesting?
Yeah.
How do you generate interest? Ableton offers a unique variety of tools for those kinds of things. Some of which I've used of yours. You had a rack you posted a long time ago, which contained beat repeaters in different configurations, and you would turn one knob and it would change a lot of things all at once. And you could very easily, with a minimal effort, create a lot of interest in something that would otherwise be static. And then as a musician, I'm playing off of that. So the machine will do something and it'll make me go in a different direction. I'm not sure if that actually answers your question or not.
No, it definitely does, because these are like some strategies you're using.
Yeah.
You're able to improvise, but you've also you're holding it down a little bit because the arpeggiator's in time and it's playing a certain selection of notes that you've predetermined that you now can sort of dance around.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge to not be too rigid and too planned, but also if you get too loose, you find yourself off, you don't even know where you are anymore. And it's hard. It's like hard to play along with other people in that way.
Right. Well, using Ableton in a band context excuse me, has its own set of unique challenges. I know a lot of drummers, and some of them are great with working with click tracks, and some of them are not. So if I know I'm gonna be using an Ableton, it limits who I can. I want to make sure I can call somebody that's comfortable with either an in-ear or some kind of monitor of a loop that they can work with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also improvising with sound effects, nature sounds. Having an instrument built like in a drum rack that has lots of sound effects that I can use on the fly while improvising with other people. That's not dependent on time or tempo. It's just like mood things.
Right.
Like we go playing a song, we get to a key change where it changes to a minor chord in a different key, and start the rainstorm, or start the bring in the sound of the ocean. I find having that, being able to stretch out in that way sonically and create these environments in an improvisational way, just adds so much flexibility. To take people on a journey, because really that's what music is all about.
Yeah, true.
Is it not? All right.
I've got a set of clips that I put on my launch pad that are just ready to be triggered, and they're bird sounds, they're thunderstorms,
exactly,
they're crickets. One of them is like footsteps walking over leaves, and
nice.
And like you said, it's funny too, because if you are playing like very like synthesized sounds, and then you start hearing these organic sounds over the top, it really kind of grabs your attention and puts it somewhere.
It's great contrast, like I'm a strong believer in contrasting elements, tempo elements with non-tempo elements, acoustic sounds with electronic sounds. These things belong together. You need contrast. It's light and dark that make you be able to see an image. If it's only light, you won't see it. Right. Or if it's only dark, you need that contrast. So I'm always looking to sort of bring that between sounds and, using different sounds that I would choose to use live on stage or in the studio and in recording. You want to contrast. I have a new record that I'm working on. Somebody had suggested a long time ago an artist name to me. They said, "Oh, you should call yourself Nail Gun." So I did for a long time, and we were in this country, so it started to not feel so comfortable anymore. And then I changed it to Nail Young, and the Young is spelled like Carl Jung, Jung.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I think I misspelled it on the links that I sent you. It should be Jung. And Carl Jung, the great the guy who dreamed up the idea of the collective unconscious and all this other really interesting stuff. Anyway, after many
Talk
years
about
of
going on a journey.
yeah, seriously. But after many years of like making records with bands and you know, jazz-based improvisational music, some soundscapey, some not. A lot of my records are drawn from actual performances. My solo electronic record I did called Soft Invaders 2 years ago was from a live on the radio performance. It's basically unedited. It was like a 70-minute performance on a radio show in Princeton, New Jersey called Music with Space, hosted by a gentleman named Mike Hunter. I should mention that in 2015, I sort of found out about and discovered this local electronic music festival called Electro-Music. And it's basically people that are, most of them have day jobs or they're not musicians by trade, but they're all doing experimental electronic music from wildly different directions. People that do computer coding only. People that have giant modular rigs, people that do processed guitar. There's a group that does theremin and lap steel. There's, you know, and they're all like lots of processing. There's a guy from the UK named Jez Creek who goes by the name Modular ESP, I think it is, Electronic Synthesis Project. And he travels with a little old-fashioned suitcase, and inside the suitcase is tons of like little tiny mixers and micro reverbs, and he sets up on a little table and he makes these gigantic walls of ambient music. And these people are like Ableton Schmableton, you know, like a lot of them use Ableton, but that's not what they're about, you know. And they meet once a year. Actually, there's one in upstate New York, and there's one in Cleveland, Ohio. There's one in Asheville, North Carolina, and they're considered the Northeast Electro Music festivals, and a lot of the same people go to all of them. And it's kind of, I've been going now for 3-4 years, and these people have become family to me. And you know, no one's like, not like there's great pianists or guitar players or anything. It's not about that at all. It's about, wow, what are you doing? You know, like, let's see how you're making music, you know, and people are doing extraordinarily interesting things. And this was before I even heard of anything loop related or anything like that. It's kind of a similar aesthetic.
Yeah, people gathering.
And, yeah, exactly. To share what they're creating with like wildly diverse, you know, systems and approaches.
I really like the ability that people that are non-musicians have to make music these days. I see it a lot at the school I work at with some of the people in my little music production club we have.
You said high school, right?
Yeah, high school.
Yeah.
And a lot of the students that come in don't know anything about music. And I always ask them, not to like make them feel bad, but like just, you know, do you know what I mean when I say like quarter notes and root
sure,
notes?
Yeah. Just well, you have to get a frame of reference.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, they feel kind of bad that they don't. I'm like, no, that's fine. That's gonna be your advantage. You know, that's gonna be the thing we actually use to make you unique.
Interesting.
And, you know, there are other students that are, you know, in band and orchestra and understand music way better than I do. So it's nice that they can all be in the same room, all experimenting, all trying things out, and all doing something that's interesting to each other. And it's kind of cool that there's still a chance, you know, there's this whole other way to access music.
Yeah, and certainly with the tools that we have now and every, you know, computers, and there's no limits. Anybody can make music. Anybody that has a vision or has an idea, can set about the task of attempting to realize it, you know. And I've met a lot of young people, especially coming to some of my user group meetings, that, you know, they found some synth, some little Eurorack module, a couple of modules or something cheap, and hooked them up, and just experiencing the joy of just working with sound, you know.
Yeah.
Not even so much caring about whether or not they know anything about music. Like they don't care.
Yeah.
But their enthusiasm is great, you know, and it's like we can hang out and we can make music together because they're into it.
Yeah. My first exposure to that was just some friends that got into like plugging a bunch of guitar pedals in and maybe a microphone and delays and making loops. And
oh, sure.
It wasn't always listenable, you know?
Right. Well, right. Exactly.
But,
it's a work in progress. Yeah.
But sometimes, and especially after a little practice, it starts becoming something, and it's like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know what this is, but it's like, it's kind of cool now. It's starting to happen. Things are coming together.
Sure.
Yeah. I've got a couple guys that I play with very, very occasionally where we'll get together, and the whole point is just to make weird music. And it's like kind of
sure.
And sometimes like I don't know if it's really meant to be listened to, but every once in a while this like kind of magic happens where it's like, oh, and when you listen back to it, it's almost magical because it's the contrast to all the madness that happened before it.
Right.
And then it comes to this like kind of place where you can never recreate it.
Yeah, right. It's not about that. It's about getting to that zone, you know, like you're working with this stuff and sound, and it's crazy. And finally you get to that place where it's like it all kind of gels all of a sudden. And, you know, if you can hang out there,
right.
You know, I mean, jazz has a lot of that idea as well, you know, like you're improvising. And I've done a lot of situations where it's just pure improvisation. There's no tune or anything, and we're just playing. But, you know, you want to be listening and allow yourself to react in ways that are maybe not that you wouldn't expect, you know, and just trying to find that zone, trying to get into that zone.
Yeah.
And one of the videos I gave you is it says improvisation on it, and it's these two guys that I work with pretty regularly, and we decided to actually give ourselves a name separate from the name of one of my groups, which we decided to call ourselves Super Cluster, after the clusters of galaxies that have been seen by the Hubble telescope. You know, hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions. Anyway, they call them superclusters. So we're going with this name because these two guys that I've been working with on and off for almost 15 years. And we get together and we improvise, and it becomes greater than the sum of its parts. You know, it's like, it's just, we're all listening, we're all reacting, and the sound just blends in such a way that it's an experience, you know, and it's not even something that like can be recreated with other people or in any other way. And it's never the same twice, you know. It's just, it's like, wow, okay, when can we do this again?
Yeah. And that's like a kind of music making that I think is important to do once in a while, where it's not about the product or the result. It's just that moment. It's just being there, working together with other people, listening to what's happening together. And it's just about the process. It's not really about where it goes, what it becomes. I think that sometimes we, you know, I guess every time I make music, I inevitably start thinking like, is this any good? Is this something people will like? Is this something I like? And a lot of times that sucks me out of the fun I'm having. And poof, I'm all of a sudden now I'm just criticizing myself instead of just enjoying that. And it's nice to have, I think sometimes it does take having a couple other people with you So if you do slip out of that, you look at your friend and you're like, okay, he's doing something really crazy. So this doesn't matter.
But you bring up an interesting point, because, a lot of us are focused on like making a recording or trying to make something that, a record or something with a finished product. But when you're improvising in that way, you're allowing yourself the freedom to explore your process without any judgment on final product.
Yeah.
And that actually, I mean, from my own standpoint, as someone that's produced a lot of records and music for dance and stuff like that, every time I improvise with people, that information is not lost.
Right.
I will see maybe things will work together, between myself and another musician in an unpredictable way that I'll never have seen before, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's interesting. That idea can be used in later productions or in other things." So allowing yourself the luxury of just making noise with people, to dig in and see like, oh, well, what do I turn the knobs? This, it's like, and you will find. I think it's important for people's process to. It's important to, when you're making finished, produced music, to have that experience of just kind of freely playing around. That can be very important. I highly recommend it for everyone.
Yeah, I've taken a few techniques away from some of these sessions, things that I wouldn't do normally because it'd be kind of ridiculous to do by myself. But you wind up finding yourself going down paths you wouldn't actually take if you were alone. And
right,
it's refreshing, and when I come back to what I normally do, what I normally do is a little different now, and it's changed, and I've got other ideas and other ways, other roads to follow.
Yeah. It's maybe what you come back to is like a little more expanded. Your mind is your ideas are a little broader. It's like, anyway, the reason I mentioned the Electro Music Festival is because the guy whose radio show I recorded that record on is a regular at the Electro Music Festival. This guy, Mike Hunter, who does, in his own words, Berlin style modular sequencing. So he has a big modular Moog system, like 5 or 6 cabinets.
Wow.
And he sets this thing up and it just goes like, and it makes this, like incredible music. And he's, it's modular. He's just turning knobs the whole time. And it's like extraordinary. But there's not that many people doing that. And he's really good at it, so it's like you have this thing. But he hosts this radio program called Music with Space out of Princeton, New Jersey, and it's worth checking out. It's got some really interesting people coming through there. But I did want to mention I have this record coming out, my first attempt at making something that remotely resembles like EDM or IDM or, something that's really kind of beat based, not a bunch of guys in a room playing album. Some of these tracks I've been working on for a couple of years. I've sent some of them to things like some of the SoundCloud links. If you want to post the link to that SoundCloud playlist I gave you, that would be great.
Yeah, that was my driving to work music today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice.
There's a lot of stuff on there. I can't imagine how far you got.
About 25 minutes.
I feel like I just kept adding tracks for like 2 hours worth of material.
Yeah.
In there. But so a lot of that stuff was just done when I first got to Push, or when I first was experimenting with Ableton and doing those kinds of things. But I've kind of reached a place now where I have some songs, some like completed songs. They still need a little editing and reworking, and I have a bunch of interludes drawn from experiments. So the plan for the album becomes a song and like a kind of soundscape experiment, and another song and another soundscape experiment and another song, and all with different approaches and different, but all done, by myself in the studio.
And this is Nail Young?
This will be the Nail Young record. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't have a working title yet.
Cool.
But I'm really close to completing it, which is like very exciting for me.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the response will be, I'll just put it up on Bandcamp and see, tack some wings on it and see if it'll fly.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited to hear it. Sounds like fun and cool experiment.
Yeah. And if it goes well, we'll do more.
Yeah.
It's just like
very cool.
So yeah, making music, man. That's what it's all about.
That's right. And you're making a lot of it. And maybe now's a good time to wrap this up. You've been really generous with your time. And
my pleasure, man.
In order to keep yourself in all of these genres of music, you probably have to go practice now. So I really do appreciate the time. It's been awesome talking to you finally in extended format here. And yeah, thanks so much for what you're doing. The work is great and it's inspiring for me. And I think people that haven't heard it are going to really enjoy it. So any place you want to direct people in particular? I mean, we'll put a bunch of these links in the show notes, but if they're just listening.
Sure. There's the master, what I call the master website, nailmusic.com.
Nailmusic.com.
Like everything is linked from there. All the downloads, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, videos, Instagram. You can get to everything, all my social media stuff from nailmusic.com. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. Nail Music ended up being kind of the branding. So Nail Music on Twitter, Nail Music on Instagram, Nail Music on Bandcamp. It's, that's like the thing. That became the thing.
Very cool.
I do have another interesting group, which may be of interest to some of your listeners, called Mr. Gone. And we do the music of these groups, Weather Report and Herbie Hancock's Headhunters. Both really big electronic jazz groups from the 70s.
Weather Report. That's not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a fool of myself. Am I?
No. That's
Is that what are they called?
Weather Report was an electronic jazz group
that
came
like
out of
Weather Report. The group that does that. Anyway, sorry.
That's something I should probably know, but I don't because I have too much other information.
Yeah. Well. I think you're doing okay.
Weather Report was formed out of Miles Davis's electric experiments in 1969 and 1970. So like taking these jazz players and okay, now we're going to play funk beats and rock beats, and we're going to use distortion on your keyboards and guitar, which was unheard of in jazz at the time. There were two co-founders, the saxophonist Wayne Shorter and the keyboardist Joe Zawinul. And Joe Zawinul was an extraordinary synth programmer as well as a keyboard player, and consistently came up with extremely interesting synthesizer sounds, and on a regular basis, like from song to song. An album would come out with 5 songs and each song would have its own synthesizer sounds, its own landscape, and they'd be improvising and playing written material. And it was an extraordinary, it was a gigantic influence on me. But just to show what you could do with synthesizers in an improvising musical context. I highly recommend people check them out.
I will. It sounds a lot better than what I thought it was.
I don't know. All that stuff is good. I love Bjork, like Vespertine changed my life. With Matmos, those guys, Matmos, that did the rhythm section on that record. Duo from San Francisco. With like sampling, stepping in a box of like crunchy material that sounded like snow and sampling and looping that in real time on stage. I mean, that's like, okay, clearly I'm not thinking this through all the way. There's many more possibilities than I'm able to actually do. But that's great. It keeps you on your toes,
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I've heard more than once that Bjork performances are.
All right, let you go. Let me go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, very cool. Everyone head down to nailmusic.com. Check out Neil's work. Cool stuff. And again, I do thank you. We'll say our goodbyes to everyone, then we'll wrap up off the air.
Yeah, sounds good.
All righty.
Thank you so much, everyone out there. And thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you, man.
Yeah, you too, Neil. Take care.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.